After the meeting at the Dragonpit in Game of Thrones Season 7, Tyrion went to talk to Cersei. He tried to convince her to agree to Dany's truce, even though she's already said no, and stormed out. And during the conversation, he also figured out that she was pregnant. Anyway, they were talking, and we didn't get a resolution, but cut to Cersei coming out and agreeing to the truce. The leading theory on what went down after the cut is that Tyrion suggested some kind of deal that after Dany dies, Cersei's unborn kid would rule. Dany can't have an heir because she's presumably infertile, so Cersei's kid would be her heir. There are a few problems with this theory, mainly that Tyrion doesn't have the authority to make this kind of deal. Can you imagine him coming to Dany and telling her, BTW, you don't get to choose your heir and it's actually your enemy's kid? She would say no, and she would be right in saying no, and Cersei would know that she would say no. So I doubt that Tyrion would even suggest this to Cersei. And if he would be very suspicious of her accepting it. So no, it does not make sense to me. And so I have an alternative theory, which is Tyrion suggested to Cersei the fake out in which he said she'll come help, but in fact would break the truce. Why would Tyrion suggest such a thing? Isn't he on Dany's side? Well, to decipher the reason, we have to go back to why the Dragonpit meeting ever took place. So here it is. Dany wanted to go north to help in the war for the living. But alas, she fears that once she takes all of her armies and dragons north, Cersei will swoop in and retake the land that Dany has conquered. That's Dragonstone, Casterly Rock, and I think that's about it. Not an amazing conquest, and if we're being logical, which Tyrion probably is to an extent, it's definitely not worth avoiding to help in the north. So Dany meets with Cersei to suggest the truth. Dany would go fight in the north, and Cersei would promise not to retake those lands while Dany fights. If Cersei agrees to this, all is well. But, of course, as we saw, she did not. So what happens now? Dany goes north anyway, or does she stay and let the north fend for itself? The logical move here would be to go anyway. The conquests that Dany achieved and wants to keep are not very many, and theoretically she shouldn't have a problem reconquering them. And more importantly, they are peanuts compared to the results of the war in the north and Dany's power to influence it. But Dany's not always a logical player. The show underlined that throughout the season, as well as the fact that she doesn't always listen to Tyrion when he's being the voice of reason. We were also hinted at the fact that Tyrion might not be 100% loyal to her. So, we have to get Cersei to agree, but it's fucking Cersei. The odds don't look very good. And so, according to my theory, Tyrion told Cersei, well, just tell Dany that you agree, but then do whatever the hell you want. Since when are you so goddamn honorable? In fact, he told her, it would be to your benefit. Because that would mean that Dany would take all her forces and you could retake her lands, which is what we talked about. So Cersei has nothing to lose and everything to gain. And honestly, we know that when those two siblings actually work together, they're pretty fucking good. And this plan is pretty fucking good. For Cersei, at least. But it's also a win for the living, which is why Tyrion devised this. But what about Dany? Well, she would be pretty upset with Tyrion once she finds out that he betrayed her and took part in deceiving her. she will probably fire him for being her hand. But if there's one thing that Tyrion learned from Jorah, is that Dany doesn't kill traitors she cares about. Worst case, she banishes them until they get grayscale, come back, save her life, etc. Which I think is a risk Tyrion is willing to take for this specific cause. And one last prediction. If this is all true, I think it would be cool if Jaime figures it out when he's reunited with Tyrion. Jaime would tell Tyrion he came to help them because Cersei will not be true to her promise, but then he'll see in Tyrion's face and in his kind of hesitation and krächzen that he had something to do with it. Anyway, I'm probably wrong about half of this, but thank you for listening anyway.